A billionaire overheard a woman refuse his charity with fierce pride, but the words she whispered after changed everything he thought he knew about power, wealth, and what it means to truly help someone. Before we begin the story, please let us know in the comments where you are watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. He stood behind the hospital corridor wall, his $1,000 shoes silent against the linoleum floor. The woman at the nurse's station was refusing his anonymous donation, $500,000 to cover her daughter's surgery. "I don't need your money," she said, her voice breaking but resolute. And then, in a whisper she thought no one could hear, "I need someone to tell me she's going to be okay. I need someone to hold me when I fall apart. I just need to not be alone in this." He pulled out his phone, dialed a single number, and said 5 words that would unravel both their carefully constructed worlds. "Clear my schedule, all of it." But to understand the weight of that single phone call, the magnitude of what he was about to sacrifice, and the woman whose brokenness would crack open his own, we have to go back. Back to 3 weeks earlier, when Nathaniel Cross still believed that money could solve any problem, and Rachel Grant still believed she could carry the world on her shoulders alone. Nathaniel Cross didn't walk into rooms. He arrived. There's a difference, you see. When you walk into a place, you're just another body taking up space, another face in a sea of faces. But when you arrive, when every head turns, when conversations pause mid-sentence, when the very air seems to rearrange itself around you, that's power. That's what $3 billion in liquid assets and a reputation for either making people's dreams come true or crushing them into dust will buy you. On this particular Tuesday morning in March, Nate arrived at the Cross Industries headquarters in downtown San Francisco at precisely 6:47 a.m., 13 minutes earlier than yesterday, 4 minutes earlier than his usual time. His driver, John, had learned years ago not to comment on these variations. Nate's patterns were deliberate, never random. Arriving at different times kept people on their toes, prevented them from preparing polished performances for his benefit. He wanted to see his empire as it truly was, not as people wanted him to see it. The building itself was a monument to calculated excess. 73 floors of steel and glass that caught the morning sun and threw it back at the sky like a challenge. The lobby, God, the lobby was something else. Marble imported from Carrara, the same quarries where Michelangelo had selected stone for his sculptures. A waterfall that cascaded down 3 stories, the sound engineered to be present but not intrusive. A whisper of nature in a temple of commerce. And in the center, suspended by cables so thin they were nearly invisible, a sculpture of interlocking chrome rings that rotated slowly, perpetually, like some mechanical model of the solar system. Nate had commissioned it for $8 million. The artist had called it infinite momentum. Nate called it a reminder. Everything keeps moving, or it dies. "Good morning, Mr. Cross." The security guard at the desk, Stevens, Nate recalled, started 3 months ago. Former military, 2 kids in college, stood a fraction straighter. Not quite at attention, but close. "Stevens." Nate nodded, already moving toward the private elevator bank. He made it a point to know names, to remember details. People thought it was kindness. It wasn't. It was strategy. A man will work harder, stay later, sacrifice more when he believes his boss sees him as a person rather than a resource. Even if, in the end, everyone was a resource. That was just the truth of it. The elevator ride to the 68th floor took 43 seconds. Nate spent 39 of them reviewing the morning's agenda on his phone. Board meeting at 8. Conference call with the Tokyo office at 9:30. Lunch meeting with Senator Whitmore at 12:15. Location changed last minute to some new restaurant in the Mission because the senator's chief of staff thought it would play better for the senator to be seen eating somewhere less obviously expensive. As if anyone was fooled by that kind of theater. At 2, a pitch from a startup that wanted Cross Industries to invest in their AI-driven healthcare platform. At 4, a deposition for that ridiculous lawsuit from a former executive who claimed wrongful termination. Nate's lawyers assured him it would be dismissed. They better be right. He didn't lose. Not in court, not in business, not in anything that mattered. The elevator doors whispered open onto a floor that looked nothing like what most people imagined when they thought of corporate offices. No cubicles, no harsh fluorescent lights, no desperate energy of people pretending to look busy. This was the executive level, and it had been designed by the same architect who'd done luxury resorts in Bali. Natural light flooded in through floor-to-ceiling windows. The furniture was Scandinavian minimalist, all clean lines and organic materials. There were plants everywhere, actual living plants, not the sad plastic imposters you'd find in lesser offices. A full-time botanist came in twice a week to maintain them, Mr. Cross. His executive assistant, Jennifer Park, fell into step beside him without breaking his stride. She'd been with him for 6 years, which was roughly 5 years and 11 months longer than most people lasted in her position. Jennifer had figured out early what so many others never learned. Nate didn't want someone who agreed with him. He wanted someone competent enough to anticipate problems before they became disasters, and brave enough to tell him when he was about to make a mistake. The quarterly reports you requested are on your desk. The design team needs an answer on the Singapore office interior by end of day. And your mother called. Nate's step faltered. Just for a fraction of a second, barely noticeable, but Jennifer noticed. She noticed everything. What did she want? She didn't say. Just asked that you call her back when you have a moment. Jennifer's tone was carefully neutral. She knew, as everyone in Nate's inner circle knew, that his relationship with his mother was complicated. Complicated the way the San Andreas fault was a crack in the ground. Technically accurate, but missing all the devastating details. I'll call her later. He wouldn't. Or he would, and he'd regret it the way he always did. Margaret Cross had a particular talent for making her son feel simultaneously like a tremendous disappointment and her only hope for redemption. 38 years old, and he still couldn't figure out how she managed that particular trick. His office occupied the corner of the building, walls of glass on 2 sides that offered a view of the city sprawling out below like a circuit board, all lights and connections and pulsing energy. His desk was clear except for a single laptop, closed, and the quarterly reports Jennifer had mentioned. Nate didn't like clutter. Clutter was distraction, and distraction was the enemy of focus. He didn't sit. Not yet. Instead, he walked to the window. Coffee in hand, Jennifer had already placed it on the side table, exactly the way he took it, black with 1 sugar, and looked out at the city he'd conquered. From up here, you couldn't see the problems. The homeless encampments in the Tenderloin, the families being priced out of neighborhoods they'd lived in for generations, the desperation that lived in the spaces between the skyscrapers. From up here, it was all just beautiful. A machine that worked, that produced, that generated wealth and opportunity and progress. Nate believed in progress. He'd built his empire on it. Cross Industries had started as a software company, but that was like saying the ocean started as a puddle. 20 years of strategic acquisitions, pivots, and calculated risks had transformed it into something else entirely. They had their fingers in everything now. Tech, real estate, green energy, biotech, even a media division that owned 3 cable channels and a streaming platform. Forbes called him the man who saw tomorrow. Business Insider ran a feature titled, Inside the Mind of Nathaniel Cross, How One Man's Vision Shaped an Industry. What they didn't write about, what they couldn't write about because they didn't know, was the cost. Not the financial cost. Money was just numbers, and numbers were easy. The personal cost. The relationships that had withered because there were only so many hours in a day, and Nate had chosen to spend them building something that would outlast him. The woman he'd almost married back before he'd fully understood that marriage required presence, not just provision. The friends from college he hadn't spoken to in years. The hobbies he'd once enjoyed. He used to paint. Can you believe that? Watercolors. mostly landscapes that had fallen away one by one until his life was nothing but work and sleep and the occasional obligatory social event. He was lonely. He knew he was lonely, but he'd made peace with it, the way you make peace with an old injury that aches when it rains. It was just part of who he was now, part of the price of being at the top. "Mr. Cross?" Jennifer's voice through the intercom. "The board members are starting to arrive. I'll be there in 5 minutes." He allowed himself those 5 minutes to just stand there, coffee cooling in his hand, looking out at the city. It was a ritual, this quiet moment before the chaos of the day consumed him. A chance to remember why he did this, why he'd sacrificed so much. Because it mattered. Because his company employed 17,000 people worldwide. Because the research his biotech division was funding might actually cure diseases, save lives, change the world. Because if he stopped moving, even for a moment, he might have to face the question that lived in the back of his mind, the one he'd spent years outrunning. Was it enough? Would any of it ever be enough? He drained the last of his coffee, set the cup down with a definitive click, and straightened his tie. The board was waiting. And Nathaniel Cross didn't keep people waiting. The morning proceeded exactly as planned, which should have been satisfying but somehow wasn't. The board meeting was smooth, no surprises, everyone agreeing with his strategic direction because they'd learned years ago that disagreeing with Nate in a board meeting was a fast track to being replaced. The Tokyo call went well, their Q1 numbers were up 18%, and the new product launch was tracking ahead of projections. Even the lunch with Senator Whitmore, which Nate had been dreading, turned out to be painless. The senator wanted Cross Industries to sponsor some youth education initiative, which was fine. It was good PR and the company could write it off. Done and done. By 1:45, he was back at the office, reviewing the pitch materials for the 2 o'clock meeting. The startup was called Medilink, and their platform was actually impressive. Using machine learning to predict patient deterioration before traditional vital signs would catch it, potentially saving thousands of lives a year in hospitals. The founders were 2 women in their early 30s, Dr. Angela Porter, who'd come from Johns Hopkins, and Priya Mehta, a former Google engineer. Smart, driven, and, according to Jennifer's background research, both had turned down acquisition offers from bigger fish than Cross Industries. "They're here," Jennifer said, appearing in his doorway. "Conference room B." Nate gathered his materials and headed down the hall. Conference room B was one of his favorites, all windows facing west, so the afternoon light filled the space with gold. It made people feel expansive, optimistic, good for pitches. Dr. Porter and Ms. Mehta stood when he entered, and Nate was immediately struck by the contrast between them. Dr. Porter was all polished professionalism, designer suit, hair in a perfect chignon, the kind of person who'd clearly learned to navigate rooms full of men who underestimated her. Ms. Mehta wore jeans and a blazer, her long dark hair loose around her shoulders, and there was something in her eyes, not nervousness exactly, but intensity. The look of someone who believed they were about to change the world and just needed someone to give them the resources to do it. Dr. Porter, Ms. Mehta. Nate shook their hands, firm but not aggressive. "Thank you for coming in. I've reviewed your materials and I'm intrigued, but I want to hear it from you. What makes Medilink different from the dozen other healthcare AI platforms trying to do something similar?" And Dr. Porter launched into the pitch. She was good, clearly good, polished and persuasive, and armed with data that backed up every claim. The technology was sound, the market opportunity was massive, the potential impact was real. Hospitals that had piloted their platform had seen a 23% reduction in unexpected patient deterioration events. But it was Ms. Mehta who really sold it. About 15 minutes into the presentation, she interrupted her partner. "Can I tell you why I actually built this?" She didn't wait for permission. 4 years ago, my sister went into the hospital for what should have been a routine surgery. Routine. They told us she'd be home in 2 days. But something went wrong. Her vitals started crashing in the middle of the night, and by the time the nurses realized how bad it was too late. She died, 27 years old, and she died from something that should have been preventable. The room had gone very quiet. This wasn't part of the prepared pitch. And you know what the worst part was? When I reviewed her medical records afterward, when I looked at all the data, I could see the signs. Hours before anyone noticed, the patterns were there. Her heart rate, her oxygen saturation, the subtle trends that together should have screamed that something was going wrong. But humans can't process all that data in real time. We can't see the forest for the trees, but machines can. Her eyes were bright, fierce. So yeah, there are other healthcare AI platforms, but none of them were built by someone who watched their sister die from a failure of human perception. None of them are personal. Nate had been prepared to say no. Or more accurately, he'd been prepared to make them a lowball offer they'd have to accept because their runway was running out and they needed capital. That's what you did in his position. You leveraged desperation. You bought assets at a discount. But something in Ms. Maida's face, in the raw pain underneath her professional veneer, stopped him. Because he recognized it. Not the specifics of her loss, but the way she'd transmuted grief into purpose. The way she'd taken something that could have destroyed her and forged it into fuel. He knew that alchemy. He'd performed it himself. "I'll fund you," he heard himself say. "Not an acquisition, an investment. 20 million for a 15% stake and a seat on your board. You keep control, you keep your vision. But I want quarterly reports, and I want you to use Cross Industries Healthcare Division resources to accelerate your hospital partnerships." Dr. Porter and Ms. Maida exchanged a glance, and he could see the shock in their faces. They'd clearly expected to negotiate, to fight for every point. "Yes," Dr. Porter said, "absolutely yes." They shook hands again, and Jennifer would handle the details, get legal involved, start the due diligence process. It was done. $20 million committed in a 15-minute meeting because a woman's grief had somehow pierced the armor Nate had spent years building. As they left, Ms. Maida turned back at the door. "Thank you, Mr. Cross. You just saved a lot of lives." "Let's hope so," he said. And then, because something about her openness made him want to return it. "I lost someone too. My brother. Car accident when I was 17. I understand what it's like to build something from loss." She nodded, understanding passing between them, and then she was gone. Nate stood alone in the conference room, looking out at the city. The afternoon light had shifted, no longer golden, but orange, the sun beginning its slow descent toward the bay. He felt strange, off balance, like something had shifted inside him that he couldn't quite name. His phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. "Deposition in 20 minutes. Car is waiting." Right. The lawsuit, back to reality. He grabbed his briefcase and headed for the elevator, pushing away whatever that moment had been. It didn't matter. He had work to do. But as the elevator descended, as the floors counted down and the city rose up to meet him, Nate couldn't quite shake the feeling that something had changed, that some door he'd thought was permanently closed had just opened a crack. He didn't know yet that the real change hadn't happened in that conference room. It would happen in a hospital 3 days from now, when a woman with fire in her eyes would refuse his money and crack open his world. Rachel Grant had learned a long time ago that pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. But some things, some lines, you just didn't cross. Even when crossing them would solve every problem, crushing you into dust. She stood at the nurses' station on the 4th floor of San Francisco General Hospital, her hands gripping the counter so hard her knuckles had gone white. The fluorescent lights overhead made everything look sickly, washed out, like the whole world was filmed through a filter of exhaustion. Which, to be fair, was pretty much how Rachel felt. Exhausted didn't even begin to cover it. She'd moved past exhausted somewhere around month 3 of this nightmare and had entered some new territory that didn't have a name yet. Maybe Walking Dead came close. "Ms. Grant, I understand this is difficult," Nurse Patricia Lawson was saying, her voice carefully modulated into that professional sympathy that healthcare workers developed after years of delivering bad news. "But you need to understand the situation. Sophie's surgery is scheduled for next Friday. That's 8 days from now. And without payment arrangements in place, the hospital administration is going to have to postpone. Postpone. Such a clean, clinical word for what it actually meant. Your daughter doesn't get the surgery that could save her life because you're poor. I understand the situation, Rachel said, and was proud that her voice came out steady. She'd had a lot of practice at this, staying steady when everything inside her was screaming. I'm working on it. I picked up extra shifts at the restaurant, and I'm selling my car this weekend. I'll have the deposit by Monday. That was a lie. Well, half a lie. She was selling her car, but even that wouldn't be enough to cover the $20,000 deposit the hospital required before they'd perform the surgery. The total cost was going to be somewhere north of $200,000, and even with the payment plan the hospital's financial services department had grudgingly offered, she'd be paying it off for the rest of her life, if she lived that long. The stress alone might kill her before the debt did. But what choice did she have? Sophie needed this surgery. The congenital heart defect that Rachel had known about since her daughter was born had been stable for years, manageable with medication and regular monitoring. But 3 months ago, something had changed. The cardiologist, Dr. Raymond, a kind man with sad eyes who'd been treating Sophie since she was an infant, had explained it in terms Rachel only partially understood. The defect was worsening. Without surgical intervention, Sophie's heart would continue to deteriorate. She might have 6 months, she might have a year, or she might not wake up one morning, her small heart finally giving up the fight it had been waging since before she was born. Sophie was 7 years old. 7. She should have been worried about playground politics and whether she'd get the lead in the school play, not whether her heart would keep beating. Ms. Grant, Nurse Lawson's expression had shifted from professional sympathy to something else. Pity, maybe, or frustration. Hard to tell. There might be another option. Sometimes there are charitable organizations or anonymous donors who help with cases like this. If you'd be willing to let me submit your information to... No. The word came out sharper than Rachel intended. She took a breath, tried to soften it. Thank you, but no. I'll handle this myself. Pride isn't going to save your daughter's life. The words hung in the air between them, brutal in their honesty. And the worst part was, Nurse Lawson was right. Rachel knew she was right, but there was something in her, something stubborn and probably self-destructive, that couldn't bear the thought of being someone's charity case. She'd spent her entire life fighting to prove she was more than her circumstances, more than the poor girl from the wrong side of town who'd gotten pregnant at 18 and had to drop out of college to raise her daughter alone. She'd built a life, damn it. It wasn't the life she'd imagined when she was younger, when she'd had dreams of becoming an architect, of creating beautiful spaces that would make people feel something. But it was hers. She worked 2 jobs, breakfast and lunch shift at Rosie's Diner in the Mission, then evenings at an upscale Italian restaurant in North Beach, where she'd lied about her fine dining experience but had been good enough to make it stick. She had a tiny apartment in the Excelsior that cost too much but was in a good school district. She paid her bills, mostly on time. She'd never asked for handouts, never expected anyone to save her, and she wasn't going to start now, even if not starting might cost her everything. I appreciate your concern, Rachel said, her voice back under control, but I'll figure this out. I always do. She turned to leave, her second-hand shoes squeaking slightly on the linoleum, when Nurse Lawson called after her. Room 447, you can visit until 8. Rachel didn't trust herself to respond. She just nodded and headed down the hallway, past rooms full of other people's tragedies, other families camping out in uncomfortable chairs and trying to make sense of medical jargon and insurance claims. The hospital at night was its own particular kind of hell, too bright and too quiet at the same time. The hum of machinery and the occasional beep of a monitor, the only sounds besides the soft padding of nurses' shoes and the whispered conversations of people too exhausted to speak at normal volume. Room 447 was at the end of the hall, and Rachel paused outside the door to collect herself. Sophie couldn't see her like this, couldn't see the cracks in her mother's armor. Kids were perceptive, scary perceptive, and Sophie was sharper than most. She'd already figured out that something was wrong beyond the usual, "You need surgery, honey," explanation Rachel had given her. Last week she'd asked if they were going to lose the apartment, and Rachel had lied, smiled bright and false, and said, "Of course not. Everything was fine. Mama had it all under control." Sophie had looked at her with those enormous dark eyes, her father's eyes, though Rachel tried not to think about that and hadn't said anything. But Rachel knew she hadn't believed it. She pushed open the door, pasting on a smile that she hoped looked genuine. Sophie was awake, propped up against pillows that were too big for her small frame, making her look even tinier than she was. She had her sketchbook balanced on her lap, drawing something with the colored pencils Rachel had brought her last week. The sight of her daughter, alive and creating something beautiful despite everything, made Rachel's chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with stress and everything to do with love so fierce it was almost frightening. "Mama!" Sophie's face lit up, and for a moment she looked like any normal 7-year-old, not like a kid whose heart was failing. "Look, I drew the bridge, the Golden Gate. Remember when we went there for my birthday?" Rachel crossed to the bed, leaning over to examine the drawing. It was actually pretty good. Sophie had her mother's eye for spatial relationships, for the way structures fit together. The bridge was rendered in careful detail, the cables swooping in graceful arcs, the towers standing sentinel against a sky Sophie had colored in swirls of orange and pink. "It's beautiful, baby. You're getting so good at this. Mrs. Martinez from the room next door said I should be an artist when I grow up." Sophie said it casually, but Rachel caught the slight emphasis on "when I grow up," the way kids did when they were testing the waters, trying to figure out if the future was still something they were allowed to count on. "You can be anything you want," Rachel said, sitting on the edge of the bed and pushing a strand of dark hair away from Sophie's forehead. "Artist, engineer, astronaut, whatever you dream about." "What did you want to be when you were my age?" The question caught Rachel off guard. Sophie had never asked that before. "I wanted to be an architect. I wanted to design buildings that would make people stop and stare and feel something." "Why didn't you?" "Because I got pregnant with you and your father disappeared and my dreams became a luxury I couldn't afford." But she couldn't say that. Wouldn't say that. Sophie already carried too much guilt about the surgery, about the money, about being sick in the first place. Kids did that, blame themselves for things that were nobody's fault, certainly not theirs. "Life just went in a different direction," Rachel said carefully. "But you know what? I got something better. I got you." It was true, even if it was also incomplete. Sophie was the best thing that had ever happened to her. But there were nights, more nights than Rachel wanted to admit, when she lay awake and thought about the parallel version of her life. The one where she'd finished college and become an architect and traveled and built a career before she'd built a family. Was that woman happier? More fulfilled? Or was she empty in ways she didn't even recognize, missing the fierce purposefulness that came from having someone depend on you completely? Rachel would never know, and most days she was okay with that. "Mama?" Sophie's voice had gone soft, uncertain. "Are we going to be okay?" And there it was. The question Rachel had been dreading, the one she didn't have a good answer for. "Yes," she said, putting every ounce of conviction she didn't feel into that single syllable. "Yes, baby, we're going to be fine. You're going to have your surgery, and you're going to get better, and we're going to go home, and you're going to finish 2nd grade and draw 1,000,000 more pictures. I promise." She shouldn't make promises she might not be able to keep. She knew that. But what else could she do? What else could she give her daughter except hope? Sophie studied her face for a long moment, then nodded and went back to her drawing. And Rachel sat there watching her daughter create beauty in the middle of fear, and tried to figure out how the hell she was going to make that promise come true. The next 3 days were a blur of desperation disguised as determination. Rachel worked her morning shift at Rosie's Diner, slinging eggs and pancakes and coffee to the early morning crowd of construction workers and office drones grabbing breakfast before their commutes. Her feet ached from standing, her back screamed from carrying too many plates at once, but she smiled and chatted and earned her tips because tips made the difference between eating and not eating, between making rent and being evicted. During her breaks, she made calls. She'd already exhausted her credit cards months ago, but maybe there was another one. Maybe some company somewhere would be stupid enough to extend her more credit she'd never be able to pay back. She called her bank about a personal loan and was denied within minutes. She looked into medical fundraising platforms, those websites where you posted your sob story and hoped strangers would care enough to donate. But the thought of putting Sophie's face and her illness on the internet for everyone to see made Rachel's stomach turn. She sold her car for $8,000, which was less than it was worth, but more than she'd feared. The man who bought it, a mechanic with kind eyes and rough hands, had looked at her carefully and asked if she was sure. She'd said yes, because she didn't have a choice. The bus could get her where she needed to go. She'd figure it out. Her evening shift at Lombardi's, the upscale Italian place in North Beach, was usually her favorite. The work was harder, more demanding, but the tips were better, and there was something satisfying about working in a place where people came to celebrate, where every meal was an event. But this week, it just felt like torture. Watching wealthy couples drop $300 on dinner without blinking, knowing that amount of money was a fraction of what she needed and might as well be $1 million for all the access she had to it. On the third night, Thursday, she served a table of tech executives who were celebrating some kind of deal. They ordered the most expensive wine on the menu, a bottle that cost $1,200. $1,200 for wine. Rachel smiled and poured and pretended she wasn't mentally calculating how many shifts she'd have to work to earn that much, how many hours of standing and smiling and pretending everything was fine. The man at the head of the table, youngish with the particular kind of confidence that came from too much success too early, made a joke about acquisitions being better than marriage because you could write them off as business expenses. Everyone laughed. Rachel laughed too, because that's what you did. You laughed at the customers' jokes even when they made you want to throw the $1,200 bottle of wine against the wall. When she brought the check, the man glanced at it, pulled out a black credit card, and didn't even look at the total. Just signed, left a 30% tip, and walked out. The tip alone was enough to feed Sophie for a month. Rachel cleared the table, pocketed the tip money, and felt something inside her crack just a little bit more. She was almost to her breaking point. She could feel it, the way you can feel a storm coming, that change in pressure that happens right before everything breaks loose. How much longer could she keep this up? How much longer before the exhaustion and the fear and the sheer impossibility of it all dragged her under? But she had to hold on. For Sophie. Everything was for Sophie. Friday morning, Rachel woke up to her phone ringing. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, probably a debt collector or someone trying to sell her something she couldn't afford. But what if it was the hospital? What if something had happened to Sophie? Hello? Ms. Grant, this is Janet Miller from San Francisco General Hospital Financial Services. The voice was brisk, professional, the kind of voice that delivered bad news efficiently because delivering it any other way would take too long. I'm calling regarding the outstanding balance for Sophie Grant's upcoming procedure. Rachel's heart sank. I have some of it. I'm working on the rest. The surgery is still scheduled for next Friday, right? That's actually why I'm calling. We've received an inquiry from a private donor who's expressed interest in covering the costs of Sophie's surgery. The world stopped. Just stopped. Rachel sat up in bed, her free hand clutching the blanket, trying to process words that didn't make sense. What? A private donor. Anonymous. They've offered to cover the full cost of the surgery and all associated medical expenses through Sophie's recovery. It's not uncommon we have several charitable organizations and individuals who help with cases like yours. I just need your permission to move forward with the arrangement. No. No, no, no. This wasn't how it was supposed to work. Rachel was supposed to figure this out herself, supposed to be strong enough and resourceful enough to save her daughter without anyone's help. She wasn't supposed to be rescued, wasn't supposed to need rescuing. Who is it? She asked. The donor. Who are they? They've requested to remain anonymous. That's standard with these arrangements. I don't want it. The words came out before Rachel fully thought them through. Thank you, but I'll handle this myself. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Ms. Grant, I'm not sure you understand. Without this donation or another payment arrangement, we won't be able to proceed with Sophie's surgery as scheduled. And given the urgency of her condition, I understand, Rachel cut her off. I'll have the money. I'll figure it out. Another pause, longer this time. I'll note that in your file, but Ms. Grant, pride isn't going to save your daughter's life. The second time someone had said that to her in less than a week, and the second time Rachel had ignored it. She hung up and sat there in her tiny bedroom, morning light filtering through the thin curtains, and tried not to think about what she'd just done. Tried not to think about the fact that she'd just turned down the answer to all her problems, because accepting it felt like admitting defeat. She was being stupid. She knew she was being stupid, but she couldn't shake the feeling that if she accepted that money, if she let some anonymous rich person swoop in and save the day, she'd be giving up something essential to who she was, some core part of herself that she'd built her entire identity around. Rachel Grant didn't need saving. Rachel Grant saved herself. Except maybe this time she couldn't. Maybe this time saving herself meant swallowing her pride and accepting help from a stranger. Maybe this time being strong meant admitting she wasn't strong enough to do this alone. She got up, got dressed, went to work, smiled at customers, poured coffee, took orders, all on autopilot, her mind somewhere else entirely. During her afternoon break, she took the bus to the hospital to visit Sophie. Her daughter was tired, sleeping more than usual, and Dr. Raymond had gently mentioned that they really couldn't afford to delay the surgery much longer. Every day they waited was a risk. Rachel sat by Sophie's bed, watching her sleep, counting the shallow breaths, and made a decision. She'd go back to the hospital administration on Monday. She'd accept the anonymous donation. She'd swallow her pride and do what needed to be done, because Sophie mattered more than Rachel's stubborn need to prove she could handle everything alone. It was the right decision, the only decision. So why did it feel like losing? That evening, Rachel's shift at Lombardi's was brutal. Friday nights were always busy, but this one seemed particularly chaotic. A party of 12 showed up without a reservation. The kitchen was backed up. 2 servers called in sick, which meant Rachel and the remaining staff were covering twice as many tables as usual. By 8 o'clock, she was running on fumes and caffeine and sheer willpower. Her feet had gone past pain into numbness. Her face hurt from smiling, but she kept moving, kept serving, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant facing the decision she'd made and the pride she'd have to sacrifice. She was taking an order from a couple at table 7, young, in love, completely oblivious to anyone else in the restaurant, when she felt her phone vibrate in her pocket. Then again, and again. 3 texts in rapid succession, which usually meant emergency. Rachel excused herself, ducked into the hallway by the kit cross, and pulled out her phone. All 3 texts were from the hospital, from 3 different people, all saying essentially the same thing. Sophie's vitals have dropped. You need to come now. The phone slipped from Rachel's hand, clattered on the tile floor. One of the other servers, Mikhail, caught her elbow as she swayed. Rachel, you okay? She wasn't okay. She was the opposite of okay, but she didn't have time to not be okay. I have to go, she said, her voice coming from somewhere far away. My daughter, the hospital. I have to go now. Go, Mikhail said immediately. I'll cover your tables. Just go. Rachel ran. Out the back door, into the alley, out to the street where she tried to hail a cab, but her hands were shaking too much to whistle, and the tears were already starting to blur her vision. A cab passed without stopping, then another. The buses would take too long, and she didn't have time. Sophie didn't have time. A black car pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down, and a man's voice said, "Are you Rachel Grant?" She should have been afraid. Should have wondered how this stranger knew her name. Should have run in the other direction. But all she could think about was Sophie, alone in that hospital room, her small heart failing. "Yes," she gasped. "Yes, I'm Rachel. I need to get to San Francisco General. My daughter, she's... I know, the man said. Get in, I'll take you. And Rachel, desperate and terrified and completely out of options, got into the car of a man she'd never met and prayed she wasn't making the last mistake of her life. The car was absurdly luxurious. That was Rachel's first coherent thought as she slid into the back seat, hands trembling, breath shallow. The leather seat smelled like money, real money. A partition separated her from the driver, a composed man in his 50s who glanced at her in the mirror. "John," he said calmly, "Mr. Cross's driver. He asked me to take you to San Francisco General, fastest route." Cross. The name meant nothing. Rachel barely managed a nod before the car glided into traffic, moving with the efficiency of something that obeyed no ordinary rules. "How did you know where to find me?" she asked faintly. "Mr. Cross knew you worked at Lombardi's," John said. "He's been aware of your situation." That should have terrified her. But Sophie was all that mattered. Stranger or not, John was getting her to the hospital faster than anyone else could. They made it in 12 minutes. As soon as they stopped, Rachel bolted for the doors. John's voice followed her. "Ms. Grant, Mr. Cross said to tell you, whatever you need, it's taken care of. No strings." She didn't answer. She was already inside, sprinting through the fluorescent maze of corridors until she reached room 447 chaos. Nurses, alarms, doctors moving in a blur. And in the middle, Sophie, pale, still. "Sophie!" Rachel tried to reach her, but a nurse caught her arm. "Ma'am, please wait outside." "That's my daughter." "I know, we're stabilizing her." Minutes or hours later, Dr. Raymond appeared. His face was drawn, serious. "Rachel," he said softly, "her heart's deteriorating faster than expected. We can't wait. She needs surgery tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow? But the money already handled." His tone gentled. "An anonymous donor covered everything. Surgery, recovery, all of it." Rachel's knees buckled. Dr. Raymond caught her before she hit the floor. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Who would do that? Why?" "I don't know," he said. "But Rachel, sometimes accepting help isn't weakness, it's wisdom." That broke her. Months of fear and exhaustion poured out in ragged sobs until she had nothing left. When she finally lifted her head, "Can I see her?" "In 10 minutes." Those 10 minutes stretched forever. She sat motionless, trying to understand what had just happened. Some stranger Cross had interfered in her life, paid for her child's operation, and erased her debt. Was that kindness or control? A nurse poked her head out. "Ms. Grant, you can come in." Sophie looked impossibly small against the white sheets, eyelids heavy. "Mama!" "I'm here, baby." Rachel squeezed her hand, careful of the IV. "Dr. Raymond says I get my surgery tomorrow. Then I can go home, right?" "Right, you'll be all fixed up soon." "And we don't have to move anymore?" The question splintered something in Rachel's chest. "No, sweetheart, we're staying." Sophie smiled faintly, then drifted to sleep. Rachel stayed beside her, holding that tiny hand, gratitude and fury warring inside her. Someone had made a decision for her, a decision that saved Sophie's life, but had done it without asking, and she was going to find out who. The surgery was set for 7 a.m. Saturday. Rachel spent the night half awake in a hospital chair, jerking upright at every monitor beep. At dawn, Dr. Raymond arrived with the surgical team. "We'll repair the septal defect," he explained. "It's delicate but routine. She's in good hands." "Just bring her back to me," Rachel said. He nodded. "I will." At 6:45, they wheeled Sophie away, her small fingers brushing Rachel's. "Love you, Mama. Love you more," Rachel whispered as the doors closed behind her. Then there was only waiting. She wandered the halls, bought coffee she couldn't taste. Every clock ticked louder than her heartbeat. 3 hours in, she returned to the empty room and froze. A man stood at the doorway, mid-30s, impeccably dressed, the kind of presence that changed the temperature of a room. "Ms. Grant," he said, "I'm Nathaniel Cross." Rachel's breath caught. "You!" He nodded once. "The one who paid for your daughter's surgery, yes." Anger rose, hot and immediate. "You had no right—" "You're right," he said quietly. "I didn't. And I'm not here for thanks. I heard you that day at the nurse's station after you turned down the donation." Her stomach dropped. He had heard the whispered confession she'd thought was private. "I just need someone to tell me she'll be okay. I need someone to hold me when I fall apart." He'd heard her lowest moment. "You had no right to eavesdrop," she said, "or to invade my life. I know, but I couldn't ignore it. You needed help, and I could help." "That's all?" she demanded. "You don't get to throw money into someone's life and call it compassion." "I'm not trying to buy anything," he said evenly. "I just didn't want you to lose your daughter because of money. I've been there watching someone die and being powerless to stop it. My brother was 17, car accident. We couldn't afford the hospital bills. I promised myself if I ever could help someone avoid that pain, I would." Rachel hesitated. His voice had gone low, almost breaking on the word brother. "You don't know me," she said finally. "That makes me suspicious." "Understandable." He met her eyes steadily. "But the surgery's already happening. Hate me if you need to, but your daughter's getting her chance." He turned to leave. "Wait." The word came out before she decided to say it. He stopped. "Thank you," she said, forcing the words through the knot in her throat. "I hate how you did it, but you saved her, so thank you." The guarded look in his eyes softened. "You're welcome." Then quietly, "Would you like me to wait with you? You said you didn't want to be alone." Rachel should have refused, but the thought of facing the next hours alone made her chest tighten. "Okay," she said, "you can stay." He chose the chair farthest from hers. They sat in silence, two strangers bound by fear and a 7-year-old's heartbeat. At 11:37 a.m., Dr. Raymond appeared. Rachel was on her feet before he spoke. "She's okay," he said first. "The surgery went perfectly, her heart strong." Rachel's knees gave out. This time, Nate caught her arm before she fell. "Can I see her?" "In 30 minutes. She's in recovery." The words "she's okay" replayed in her mind like a mantra. Relief came in waves so strong it left her shaking. "She's okay," she whispered again. "She is," Nate said. "You did it." Rachel shook her head. "You did it. Without you, she wouldn't have made it to surgery," he said softly. "You kept fighting. Don't discount that."
She met his eyes, realizing how tired he looked, how human. Not a savior, not a suit. Just a man who'd seen too much loss and didn't know what to do with his power, except try to rewrite the ending for someone else. "I'm sorry," she said. "For being angry. Don't be. You had every right." He rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly awkward. "I overstepped. I knew I was crossing a line, but I did it anyway. Still figuring out where compassion ends and intrusion begins." "Figuring it out?" He gave a small, self-deprecating smile. "How to use what I have to actually help people. Not just throw money at problems. Something that feels real." Rachel studied him, this wealthy stranger who seemed more lost than arrogant. "Then tell me the real reason," she said softly. "Why us?" He hesitated. "Because I saw you." "Saw me?" "You were exhausted and terrified, but you still held your head high. You reminded me of myself, of that need to prove you can handle everything alone. I thought maybe helping you would remind me what being human felt like." The honesty in his voice stripped away the last of her anger. "I'm Rachel," she said at last, holding out her hand. He took it gently. "Nathaniel or Nate, you can call me whatever. Though I suppose you already knew that." They stood there, hands clasped, neither sure what to say next. Then a nurse appeared. "Miss Grant?" "Sophie's awake. You can see her now." Rachel dropped his hand and started toward the door, then turned back. "Are you coming?" Surprise flickered across his face. "You want me to?" She should meet the person who saved her life. So he followed her down the hall to the pediatric ICU. Sophie lay small but alive, color back in her cheeks. Her eyes fluttered open. "Are you an angel?" she asked sleepily. "Mama said an angel helped us." Nate smiled faintly. "No, sweetheart. I'm not an angel. Just someone who wanted to help." Sophie's fingers brushed his. "Thank you." Rachel watched him, this man who'd built walls of steel and money, and saw something shift. His shoulders eased. The distance in his eyes melted into something softer, almost wonder. He'd come here to fix a problem, to balance an equation of guilt and power. But standing beside a little girl with a mended heart, he felt something he hadn't in years: connection. As he looked at Rachel, she saw it too. The dawning realization that this wasn't charity anymore. It was the beginning of something neither of them understood yet. And for the first time, Nathaniel Cross, man who could buy anything, control everything, realized there were still things in the world he couldn't price. Like grace, like forgiveness, like the small hand of a child who'd simply said, "Thank you." Recovery, Rachel learned, wasn't a straight line. It was a zigzag of hope and fear, triumphs and setbacks, endless waiting for the next small victory. Sophie came through surgery beautifully. The first day, she was pale and groggy, chest wrapped in gauze, wires beeping in steady rhythm. By day 2, she sat up. By day 3, she was complaining about hospital food. "When kids start complaining, they're getting better," Dr. Raymond said with a grin. A week later, Sophie moved from ICU to a regular room, brighter walls, sunlight, a view of the city. It still smelled like antiseptic, but it felt closer to living. And through it all, Nathaniel Cross kept showing up. Not daily, he had a CEO's calendar, but often enough that Rachel started to expect him, and to notice when he didn't come. He'd appear with decent coffee, new sketchbooks, or tiny puzzles to keep Sophie's mind busy. At first, Rachel assumed he was monitoring his investment, making sure his donation had been worth it. But then she saw him sitting beside Sophie, listening as she described her fantastical glass castles and gravity-defying bridges, and realized this wasn't obligation. "I want to design buildings that make people feel things," Sophie told him one afternoon, pencil in hand. "Like churches that make you feel small but happy." "That's a beautiful goal," Nate said, studying her drawing. "Your mother wanted to be an architect too." Sophie's eyes widened. "Really, Mama?" Rachel flushed. "A long time ago, before you. Why didn't you?" "Life had other plans." Sophie nodded and went back to sketching. But Nate's gaze lingered. Later, after Sophie fell asleep, he gathered his coat. Rachel stopped him. "Why do you keep coming?" she asked quietly. "I mean, thank you, but what are you getting out of this?" He hesitated. "At first I thought I should check on her. Then I went back to my office, looked at 1,000 emails and balance sheets, and everything felt hollow. Here, it feels real. So we're your escape?" she asked, sharper than intended. "Your poverty tourism project?" "No," he said quickly. "If that's what it feels like, I'll stop. But I think I'm just trying to remember how to connect with people who don't want anything from me. I accepted your money because you had to, not because you wanted to." His tone softened. "Do you know how rare that is? People who look at me and just see me." Rachel recognized the loneliness in his voice. She'd lived her own version of it, the friends who drifted away, the men who ran when they saw how much responsibility came with her. "So, what do you want from us?" "I want to be your friend," he said simply. "To bring Sophie books. To bring you coffee. To be someone in your life who's just there." She searched his face for the angle and found none. "Okay, friends, but you stop bringing the fancy coffee. Either we both drink cafeteria sludge or nothing." He laughed, the sound surprisingly light. "Fine, but you'll regret it. I already do. It tastes like someone strained it through a gym sock." Lovely image. For the first time, they both smiled easily. Something fragile but real began to form. The next 2 weeks settled into rhythm. Rachel all but lived at the hospital, taking leave from her jobs. Her co-workers surprised her with an envelope of cash enough to cover missed rent. "We take care of our own," Mikhail said gruffly at Lombardi's. Sophie got stronger every day, pacing hospital corridors with cautious pride. "She's officially on the mend," Dr. Raymond announced, when Sophie started declaring herself bored. Nate kept visiting 3-4 times a week, sometimes with gifts, sometimes with nothing but time. He helped her build Lego cathedrals, explained blueprints, answered endless questions. Sophie began calling him Mr. Alex, a title she used with unfiltered affection, and Rachel, despite herself, looked forward to his visits. He listened when she talked about double shifts, asked about her dreams without making them sound childish. They spoke of everything from architecture to grief. One night, over truly awful coffee, he confessed, "My mother wanted me to be a doctor. CEO doesn't sound respectable in church circles. Do you ever talk? Holiday calls, staged dinners. 20 years, and we still speak different languages." Sophie's father was like that, she said quietly. "We never understood each other. He was gone before she was born." "I'm sorry. I'm not. Not anymore. She's better off without someone who didn't want to be here." Nate studied her. "You're an amazing mother." Heat rose in her face. "You're good with her, too." "I have 17 nieces and nephews," he said, half smiling. "I've been trained," she laughed. 17? Large extended family. Lots of expectations. Lots of performance. Everything I do is performance, how I talk, what I wear, who I'm seen with. It's exhausting." "Then stop performing." "I can't. The company is me. Without it, I don't know what's left." "There's more," Rachel said softly. "I see it when you're with Sophie. When you stop trying," he exhaled, shaky. "Pretty decent, huh? Don't push your luck, Cross." The banter felt effortless, dangerous. That night, lying on the cot beside Sophie's bed, Rachel replayed their talk. She told herself it was gratitude, not attraction. Friendship, not risk. Because risk meant heartbreak, and she'd had enough of that. Still, when he smiled, something in her chest betrayed her. Sophie was discharged on a Thursday afternoon, 18 days post-surgery. Dr. Raymond handed Rachel a folder thick with instructions. "You've got this," he said. "Call me for anything." She hugged him, words failing. Nate arranged transportation, a comfortable medical van, not his sleek sedan. Rachel tried to protest, but he said simply, "Let me do this. Please." She let him. Maybe accepting help wasn't weakness. Maybe it was trust. Home felt strange after weeks away, smaller, quieter. But when Sophie curled up in her own bed, alive and rosy-cheeked, it felt like victory. Then came the shriek. "Mama, come look!" Sophie's tiny room had been transformed. A new bookshelf stacked with architecture books, colored pencils, fresh sketch pads. A small reading chair. On the wall, her hospital drawings framed like gallery pieces. "Mr. Alex did this," Sophie whispered in awe. Rachel nodded, throat tight. "Can we call him? Say thank you?" "I'll text him," she promised. In the kitchen, phone buzzing, she read a message from an unknown number. "Hope Sophie likes the room. If you need anything, I'm here." She typed back. "She loves it. Thank you. For everything. You're welcome. Get some rest. Both of you. Then, can I still visit? Or do you need space?" Rachel stared at the screen. Logic said to create distance. Gratitude and fear said the same. But her heart, traitorous thing, typed, "You can visit. Bring that awful hospital coffee. It'll taste worse at your place." "I'm counting on it." She smiled, warmth blooming in her chest. A mistake, surely. But after surviving so much, maybe she'd earned the right to one beautiful mistake. Later, with Sophie asleep under glow-in-the-dark stars, Rachel stood in the doorway watching her daughter's steady breathing. The miracle of it. She let herself imagine just for a breath what it might be like not to be alone anymore. Someone who showed up, who saw her, who made her laugh over terrible coffee, and looked at her like she mattered. It was dangerous to hope, but Rachel had survived worse. Maybe she'd survived this too. Life settled into something almost like normal, except normal had been redefined. Sophie's recovery went better than anyone dared hope. She tired quickly and needed checkups, but her color returned. Her laugh came back, and the apartment filled again with music and noise instead of worry. The anonymous donation had done more than save her. It had bought Rachel a little air to breathe. She returned to work. Mornings at Rosie's Diner, evenings at Lombardi's, once Mrs. Cross from next door could watch Sophie. Money was still tight, but at least the panic had lifted, and Nate kept showing up. Not daily his life ran on flights and meetings, but whenever he was in town he'd text simple things. Coffee? How's Sophie? Found a gaudy book for her. When he finally stepped inside her apartment for the first time, Rachel was almost painfully self-conscious. The second-hand couch, the cabinet doors that wouldn't close, the ceiling stain she stopped seeing months ago, all of it suddenly screamed small. Nate only smiled. This is nice. Feels like a home. It's small, she said. It's lived in. There's a difference. He noticed the sketches scattered on the table, community center redesigns, small space housing concepts. You drew these? Just ideas. They're good, he said. Really good. Ever think of finishing your degree? With what money? She scoffed. Ships come back to port. He looked at her carefully. You're what, 33? That's young. I could help an investment, not charity. No. Her tone was sharper than she meant. You keep trying to fix my life with your money. That's not. It is. I need to do this my way. It became their first real fight, her pride against his instinct to help. Both too stubborn to yield. He left quietly that evening. She expected silence afterward. Maybe the polite disappearance rich people were good at. Instead, you were right. Your life, your choices. I'll try to respect that. But you're talented. You deserve to chase what you want, even if I'm not the one who helps you. Rachel stared at the message for a long time before replying, Thank you. I'm sorry for snapping. Accepting help is hard. Offering it isn't easy either, he wrote. Turns out relationships are complicated. Is that what this is? She asked, then instantly regretted sending it after a long pause. I think so. I don't know what kind exactly, but it's something, and I don't want to lose it. Me either. They grew careful after that, more aware of boundaries, more honest about fears. Nate told her about the strain of running cross-industries, of sleepless nights balancing markets and people's livelihoods. She told him about double shifts and the guilt of not being home enough. They argued, challenged, learned. When she read online that Cross Industries planned to acquire a medical supply company and close its Oakland warehouse, she confronted him. You'll put 300 people out of work, she said. He blinked. How did you know that? It's not public, I read, she said simply. And maybe numbers shouldn't be the only thing you look at. He'd listened. Really listened. 2 weeks later he called. We're keeping the warehouse open. Renovating instead of closing. You were right, the community impact matters. For the first time, Rachel saw that her voice could reach into a world she'd never belonged to. By late autumn, their friendship had deepened into something that felt like standing on the edge of a bridge, still under construction, exciting and unstable. He'd visit for dinner, sit with Sophie over her homework, and the apartment would feel lighter. Rachel tried to remind herself that people like Nate lived in penthouses, not walk-ups, that they didn't stay, but he kept proving her wrong. One Friday night, after Sophie fell asleep, her phone buzzed. Still awake? Unfortunately. Same. Can I call? She hesitated only a moment. Sure. Hey, he said, voice rough with fatigue. Sorry it's late. It's fine. Where are you? New York, investor dinner. 3 hours of pretending to care about stock portfolios. He chuckled softly. You'd have called me out for faking interest. I would have. You get that glazed look. So you've been studying me? Maybe. I'm glad someone keeps me honest, he said quietly. Then, after a pause, Rachel, what are we doing? Whatever this is, what is it? Her heartbeat stumbled. I don't know. What do you think it is? I think I'm falling for you. The words hung in the air, fragile and huge. I've been falling since that first day in the hospital, he continued. You looked at me like I was both salvation and the world's biggest nuisance. I don't know how our lives fit together, but I can't stop thinking about you or Sophie. Pretending this is just friendship feels dishonest. Rachel closed her eyes. Nate, our worlds don't match. You have jets and boardrooms. I have rent due Friday and a kid in second grade. I can't risk Sophie getting attached to someone who might vanish. Why assume it ends badly? He asked. Why not figure it out together? You and Sophie make me feel more real than anything else in my life. Tears burned her eyes. She wanted to believe him. I'm scared, she whispered. Me too. But maybe scared together beats safe alone. What about Sophie? If she gets hurt, she won't. I'm not leaving. Give me the chance to prove it. She sat in silence, weighing safety against possibility. The predictable loneliness she knew versus the terrifying unknown she wanted. Okay, she said finally. We try, but slow. If it ever hurts Sophie, we stop. Deal? Deal, he said, relief threading through his voice. When I'm back Monday, let me take you to dinner. A real date. A date, she repeated, tasting the word. Where? Somewhere in the middle. Your world and mine. Trust me. That word again. Trust. She hesitated, then, okay, Monday. But Nate? Yes? If you ever hurt my daughter, no money or power will protect you from me. Understood, he said solemnly. I'd never hurt either of you. That's a promise. They kept talking, voices softer as the night stretched on about his mother, who'd raised him alone in San Francisco's outer sunset, about her parents who'd died in the crash that still haunted her, about responsibility and fear and dreams that refused to die. Near 2 a.m., he murmured, You should sleep. So should you. Worth it, he said. Talking to you's always worth it. When they hung up, Rachel sat in the dark kit cross listening to the quiet apartment, feeling the steady pulse of hope she hadn't dared allow in years. She checked on Sophie sleeping peacefully under the glow-in-the-dark stars and whispered, I hope he's worth it, baby, in the morning. When she told Sophie that Mr. Alex had asked her on a date, the little girl's face lit up. Does that mean he's your boyfriend? Maybe, Rachel said. We'll see. How do you feel about that? Sophie thought hard. I think it's good. You laugh more when he's here. Out of the mouths of babes. Rachel hugged her daughter tight, laughter catching in her throat. For the first time in years, she felt the cautious, dizzy warmth of wanting more than survival. Monday couldn't come fast enough, and for once, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, good things could happen to people like her. Monday arrived with the nervous energy of a first date ridiculous, Rachel told herself, because she was 33, not 16. But butterflies didn't care about age or motherhood or what you'd survived. They just showed up, uninvited. Nate had been vague. Dress comfortable, but nice. Not helpful. She stared into her narrow closet. 3 dresses, the work uniform, no. A faded floral sundress, too casual. Then the dress. Navy blue, simple, elegant, bought 2 years ago when she'd briefly believed she might have a life beyond bills and exhaustion. She hadn't worn it since. It still fit, barely. Maybe fragility was part of the look. Mama, you look pretty. Sophie appeared in the doorway, pajama-clad, beaming. You think so? Not too fancy? It's perfect, Sophie said. Like a princess. Are you nervous? A little. It's okay to be nervous. Mr. Alex is nervous too. That means it matters, Rachel laughed, hugging her tightly. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just notice now. By 7, she'd tamed her hair into soft waves and applied the lightest touch of makeup. In the bathroom mirror, she saw lines of fatigue and strength. Beauty, carved by survival. The knock came exactly at 7. Of course, Nate stood there in dark jeans and a button-down no armor of suits tonight. He looked human. Hi, he said. Hi, you look... He faltered. Beautiful doesn't cover it. Rachel blushed. You clean up pretty well yourself. Thought we should both be out of our comfort zones. Level field. He waved to the living room. Hi, Sophie. Hi, Mrs. Carson. 10 o'clock curfew, Sophie called. That's when princesses turn into pumpkins. Then 10 it is, Nate promised. I've already checked with the fairy godmother. Outside waited an ordinary SUV. No, John? Rachel asked as he opened the door. Borrowed a friend's car. John said driving myself was a security risk. I told him tonight was worth it. He actually drove. Through twilight streets they passed from the working-class blocks of Excelsior into the glowing wealth of Pacific Heights. Rachel tried to guess restaurant, rooftop. Instead, he turned toward the marina. We're going to the water. Sort of. He parked near Crissy Field and led her toward a converted brick building. The sign read, Fort Point Gallery and Studio Space. Inside, high ceilings, warm light, models and photographs everywhere, community centers. Low-income housing with beauty and grace. Architecture that cared. What is this? An art and architecture collective, he said. Designers making public spaces better. I'm on the board. They're having a showcase. I thought you might want to see what's possible. Something cracked open inside her. These were the kinds of buildings she'd dreamed of creating. A woman approached, paint on her hands and kindness in her eyes. Nate, you must be Rachel. I'm Sarah Martinez, director here. He's told me so much about you. Rachel shot Nate a look. Only the good parts, Sarah said. Your sketches are stunning. My sketches? You left your sketchbook at the apartment, Nate admitted. I photographed a few pages for inspiration. I hope that's not terrible. It was, but somehow she couldn't be angry while Sarah was looping an arm through hers. Come, Sarah said. Let me show you around. We have a new project starting a community center redesign. We could use your perspective. The next 2 hours blurred into possibility. Architects who'd started late. Programs for working parents finishing degrees. Grants Rachel had never imagined existed. Every conversation made her chest ache with long, dormant hope. Through it all, Nate stayed back, letting her have the spotlight, watching her rediscover herself. Finally, standing before a model of sustainable housing, she turned to him. You did all this. I just opened the door, he said. The rest is you. What if I'm not ready? What if I don't belong anymore? You belong anywhere you choose. He took her hand. The contact was electric. Just let yourself imagine again. Sarah returned with a younger woman. Rachel, meet Dr. Miyako Tanaka, our structural engineer. She's been raving about your designs. You've seen them too. Guilty, Dr. Tanaka said brightly. You have real spatial intuition. Ever think of going back to school? I have a daughter, 2 jobs. So did I, well, twins, Dr. Tanaka said. It's hard, but possible. There are scholarships. Here my card. Call me. By the time they left, Rachel carried a folder of opportunities and 3 business cards. That was, she exhaled, incredible. And yes, I'm still mad you showed strangers my work. I deserve that, Nate said. I overstepped again, but I wanted you to see what I see. No one's ever believed in me like that, she said quietly. I'm angry and grateful at the same time. You deserve belief, he said, fierce now. You're extraordinary. I just wish you knew it. They'd driven back toward the bridge, lights glittering on the bay, when he parked and faced her. I see someone who's been tested by life, he said, who bent instead of breaking, who gave up her dreams for love and still found grace. You're the strongest person I know, Rachel, and the most real. Tears burned her eyes. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm barely holding it together. That's what strength is. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, fingers trembling slightly. I'm not good at this being open, but you make me want to try. What parts of you are you hiding? She asked. The part that's scared, he said simply. of failing, of waking up alone, realizing the empire means nothing. The part that wants things I keep telling myself I don't deserve: family, home, someone who sees me. Rachel touched his cheek. I see you. He caught her hand, kissed her palm. Can we be brave together? Figure out how to build something real? I'm terrified, she whispered. Me too. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe alone. Their kiss was inevitable slow, then hungry, weeks of tension burning away. When they broke apart, both were breathless. I've wanted to do that for weeks, he said. Only weeks? I've been thinking about it since the hospital. You hid it well. I'm a waitress, she teased. We're trained to hide everything. He laughed, but she sobered first. We need to be smart about Sophie, about our worlds. I can't just leap blindly. I know. We'll be careful, he said. But Rachel, this isn't casual. I'm all in. She looked at him a long moment, then nodded. Okay, all in. They talked for another hour, stealing quiet kisses, trading fragments of their lives. For the first time in years, Rachel felt possibility stretching out before her instead of fear. At last, he glanced at his watch. 9:40. I promised Sophie I'd have you home by 10. She'll interrogate me, Rachel said, smiling. Tell her I was a perfect gentleman. Mostly, I have no regrets about the kissing. The drive home was soft and full of promise. At her door, he kissed her once more, beneath the flickering hallway light. When can I see you again? I'm off Wednesday. My place, then, he said, then quickly, or somewhere neutral. Your place is fine. I want to see your world. He looked relieved. It's mostly furniture and a view. I'll decide that. She kissed him again. Now go before Mrs. Carson demands your intentions. My intentions are entirely honorable. Pause. Mostly. After he disappeared down the stairs, Rachel slipped inside. Mrs. Carson looked up from her knitting. Good date? Very. That young man's special, Mrs. Carson said. Don't let him get away, but don't let him think it's easy either. When the older woman left, Rachel tapped on Sophie's door. I know you're awake, Sophie burst out, grinning. Did he kiss you? Yes, and yes, we're together. But this is new, honey. We have to take it slow. It's working, Sophie said confidently. He makes you happy. That's what matters. Maybe it was that simple. Later, in bed, Rachel checked her phone. Nate. Made it home. Can't stop thinking about you. Sweet dreams, Rachel. Sweet dreams. And thank you for tonight, for believing. Nate. Always. Rachel fell asleep, smiling. For the first time in years, she dreamed not of fear or survival, but of light bridges, blueprints, a future where wanting more wasn't foolish. Maybe wanting was human, and maybe, finally, she deserved it. Wednesday arrived with the jittery excitement of a second first date. Rachel checked her outfit 3 times, redid her hair twice, until Sophie finally sighed. Mama, you look perfect. Stop fussing. Nate had insisted on sending John. She'd tried to refuse, but his voice on the phone had been gentle and firm. You do everything for everyone. Let me do this for you. So here she was, gliding through San Francisco in a car that cost more than her annual income, watching the city change outside brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck, into something sleeker, shinier, more foreign. Pacific Heights was another world. The glass tower John pulled up to looked like something out of a future where people no longer worried about bills or broken appliances. A uniformed doorman greeted her by name and ushered her toward a private elevator. Private elevator. Of course, the ride up was silent and smooth. Rachel watched the numbers climb 10, 20, 30, 40, and tried to steady her breathing. This was still Nate, she reminded herself, the man who brought hospital coffee, who laughed at her jokes, who made her daughter smile. The elevator doors opened directly into his home, and for a moment, Rachel could only stare. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a panoramic view of the bay and the bridge, sunlight melting into gold across the water. The space was vast, immaculate, more museum than home. Marble counters, sleek furniture, a piano gleaming in the corner. The air smelled faintly of cedar and something expensive she couldn't name. Nate appeared, casual in jeans and a gray sweater, smiling like he'd been waiting for her all his life. "You made it." He kissed her softly. "Welcome. Want the tour?" "This is—" She gestured helplessly. "A lot," he winced. "Too much?" "It's beautiful. Just—" She turned toward the skyline. "My toilet leaks, and yours probably costs more than my rent." He smiled ruefully. $8,000, apparently. "Obscene, I know. You know?" she said, incredulous. "Nate, do you realize what I could do with $8,000? "Yes," he said quietly. "And I also know I can't apologize for having it. I built this company from nothing. But I do know it's unfair that I can spend that much on a bathroom while you're working double shifts to survive." "I'm not asking you to apologize," she said, softer now. "But I need you to see that this world of yours, it's foreign to me. It scares me a little, and it makes me wonder how we can meet in the middle." He met her gaze. "We'll figure it out. But tonight, let's just be us. No titles. No barriers," Rachel hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Fine. Show me dinner. And if you say it's catered, I'm walking out." "I cooked." "You did not." He raised a brow. "Doubt me at your peril." The dining area was set beautifully, but simply candlelight. 2 plates, and the unmistakable aroma of real food. Pasta with homemade sauce, salad, warm bread. "This looks incredible," she said. "Family recipe," he said, pouring wine. "My mother's, ironically enough. One of the few things we agree on." They ate, and slowly, the tension dissolved. He talked about work, the relentless pace, the deals, the constant pressure to chase more. "I keep asking myself when it ends," he said quietly. "How much is enough? When can I stop proving myself?" "Can you?" she asked. "In theory, yes. In reality, I don't know who I'd be if I stopped. I've spent 20 years being Nathaniel Cross, CEO. Without that, what's left?" "You," she said. "The man who shows up for people." "That's enough." He looked at her, something vulnerable breaking through. "Sometimes I'm afraid if I stop, I'll disappear. That all that's left under the success is the scared 17-year-old who couldn't save his brother." Rachel reached across the table, squeezed his hand. "You don't disappear just because you rest. You're more than the walls you built." After dinner, they moved to the couch plush, probably imported from somewhere expensive, and talked about lighter things. Sophie's latest drawing, a documentary he'd watched that reminded him of her. "I want you to meet some of my friends," he said suddenly. "Small dinner next week. Nothing formal. I want them to meet the woman who's made me happier than I've been in years." Rachel froze. "Nate, please," he said gently. "If we're serious, you need to see all sides of my life." "What if they think I don't belong?" "Then they're wrong," he said simply. "You're not an accessory, Rachel. You're extraordinary," she exhaled, shaky. "Okay, one dinner. But if anyone looks down on me, I'm gone." "Deal," he said, grinning. For a while, it was easy again, talking, kissing, the city glowing beneath them. Until his phone rang. His whole body changed. "Mother," he said into the phone, voice tightening. "Now's not a good time." A pause. "No, I can't tomorrow." Another pause, longer. "Fine, Sunday dinner, but I'm bringing someone." When he hung up, he looked defeated. "She wants dinner," he said. "She always wants dinner. It's her favorite battleground. You told her about me?" "I said I was seeing someone special. She'll want to meet you, but she's difficult, critical. You don't have to come." "I'll come," Rachel said, before she could stop herself. Let's just get it over with." "She can be cruel," he warned. "I work with customers," she said dryly. "I'm trained for cruelty," he laughed, but his eyes were worried. "If she crosses a line, we leave. Promise me. Promise." They said goodnight soon after, the warmth of the evening shadowed by the storm she felt approaching. John drove her home. Sophie was asleep, Mrs. Carson knitting quietly. "Complicated night?" the older woman asked. "Very," Rachel hesitated. "Have you ever loved someone from a completely different world? Someone you wanted to be with but weren't sure you could?" Mrs. Carson smiled faintly. "My husband's family had money. Mine didn't. They said we'd never last. We did 43 years. It was hard work, bridging those worlds. But love that endures hardship is worth more than ease that fades." "But what if the gap's too wide?" "Then you tried," Mrs. Carson said simply. "And that's noble, too. Don't decide it's impossible before you've really tried." Her words lingered long after Rachel crawled into bed. Friday afternoon, Lombardi's was buzzing with pre-dinner chaos when a voice sliced through the noise. "Rachel Grant, I thought that was you." Rachel turned and her stomach dropped. The woman was elegant, composed, terrifyingly self-assured. Pearls, silk, the posture of someone who had never waited for anything. She didn't need an introduction. "Mrs. Cross," Rachel said evenly. "We haven't met." "No, but I make it my business to know who's in my son's life," Margaret Cross said, stepping closer. "I believe we have dinner plans Sunday. I wanted to see what all the fuss was about." Rachel's co-workers froze nearby, pretending not to eavesdrop. "I'm working," Rachel said politely. "Perhaps another time. This will only take a moment." Margaret's tone was smooth steel. "My son tells me you have a daughter." 7? Heart surgery recently?" Rachel's jaw tightened. "Yes. And Nate paid for it. Very generous of him. He's always had a soft spot for charity cases." The words hit like a slap. Rachel forced her expression to remain calm. "He helped because he's kind. I'm grateful for that." "Gratitude is good," Margaret said sweetly. "But sometimes it gets confused with other emotions, romantic ones. I'd hate for you to mistake my son's charity for love." "I'm not confused. Aren't you?" Margaret's voice dropped. "You're a nice woman, I'm sure. But you and my son? Different worlds. He needs someone who fits his life, not someone who'll be out of her depth at board dinners. Better to end it now before you or your daughter get hurt." That last word, daughter, landed like a threat. Rachel's hands curled into fists. "You can insult me all you want, Mrs. Cross, but don't use my child to do it." Margaret's eyes gleamed. "You're defensive. That tells me you know I'm right. My son will realize it soon enough." "What I realize," Rachel said coldly, "is that you should leave before I stop pretending to be polite." Margaret studied her, then smiled a predator's smile. "Sunday, 6 o'clock. Try to wear something appropriate." And then she was gone. Rachel stood shaking. Mikhail appeared beside her. "Who was that hurricane in pearls?" "My boyfriend's mother." "Ah, makes sense." He squeezed her shoulder. "She's wrong, you know. That man looks at you like you're his world." Rachel wanted to believe him, but the damage was done. That night, her phone buzzed. "Nate. My mother told me she stopped by." "What did she say?" Rachel hesitated, then typed, "That I'm not right for you, that this is charity, that Sophie and I will get hurt." The phone rang instantly. "Rachel, I'm so sorry," Nate said, voice tight. "She had no right. She's your mother," Rachel said quietly. "And she's not entirely wrong. Don't say that. Don't let her poison this." "She's not the poison, Nate. Reality is. You and I, stop." His voice cracked. "Please don't give up because of her. Come to dinner Sunday. Show her she's wrong. Show me you're still with me." Rachel thought of Mrs. Carson's words about giving love a chance, of Sophie's laughter, of Nate's eyes when he said, "You matter to me." "Okay," she whispered. "But if she's cruel, I'm leaving. And you need to decide whose side you're on." "I'm already on your side," he said fiercely. "Always. Don't make me the reason you fight with her." "Rachel," he said softly, "you're not the reason. You're the reason I finally stopped letting her win." They talked until the fear dulled. But when Rachel hung up, the doubts remained, coiled and heavy. Sunday would be the test of Nate's courage, of her strength, of whether love could survive the fault lines between their worlds. And as she stared at the cracks in her ceiling, Rachel couldn't help but wonder if she was watching their foundation fracture, one hairline line at a time. Sunday arrived with the kind of dread usually reserved for root canals and IRS audits. Rachel had spent 2 days pacing, second-guessing, and trying on every dress she owned. Nothing felt right. Everything was either too casual or screamed trying too hard. Finally, in desperation, she called Sarah Martinez from the Architecture Collective. "Margaret Cross?" Sarah had repeated, tone half amused, half sympathetic. "Oh, honey, she's legendary. Don't try to impress her. She'll smell it a mile away. Just be yourself. And don't flinch. She respects strength, even when she hates it." "What if being myself isn't enough? Then she's not good enough for you," Sarah said. "And if Nate lets her treat you badly, he's not either. But from what I saw at the gallery, he adores you. That man's already chosen his side." Rachel hoped she was right. Now, staring into the bathroom mirror in her navy dress, the same one she'd worn on their first date, Rachel tried to see what Nate saw: a survivor, a mother, a woman worth loving. But all she saw was someone walking into a war zone armed only with hope. Sophie appeared in the doorway, pajama-clad and sleepy-eyed. "You look beautiful, Mama," Rachel smiled. "Thank you, baby. I need you to be good for Mrs. Carson tonight, okay? Is Mr. Alex's mom mean?" Rachel hesitated. "She's protective of him." Sophie crossed her arms. "You're good enough. You're the best mama in the world. Mr. Alex knows that." Rachel hugged her tightly, fighting tears. "I love you so much." "I know," Sophie said, grinning. "Now go be brave." At 5:30, Nate texted, "John is on his way." "You ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be," she typed back. "Whatever happens tonight, we're in this together." She wanted to believe that Margaret Cross's mansion loomed like something out of a Victorian postcard. 3 stories, white columns, manicured garden, windows glowing like judgmental eyes. John pulled up to the curb. Rachel sat frozen for a moment, staring at the door that would decide the fate of her relationship. "Ms. Grant?" John asked gently. "Mr. Cross is waiting inside. Want me to walk you up?" "Yes," she whispered. At the top of the steps, John paused. "For what it's worth, I've driven Mr. Cross for 6 years. I've never seen him this happy. Don't let anyone tell you you're not the reason for that." Before she could reply, the door opened and there was Nate, tension melting into a smile when he saw her. "You came. I said I would." He kissed her softly before leading her inside. The foyer gleamed with chandeliers, polished wood, and museum-level art. Old money practically perfumed the air. "You look incredible," he murmured. "But I need to warn you, Mother invited guests, board members, and their daughter." Rachel's stomach dropped. "Victoria Ashworth?" He winced. "You know her name? I can guess the type." "She's harmless," he said quickly. "But my mother, she's trying something. We can leave if you want." "No," Rachel said. "Leaving would mean she wins. Just be on my side. Clearly. Always." He led her down a hallway lined with family photos. A stoic young Nate beside a laughing older brother David, she realized. The warmth in that photo made her chest ache. They entered a living room where 5 people stood mid-conversation. The chatter died instantly. Margaret Cross stood by the fireplace, regal and sharp in an emerald gown. Beside her, Richard and Patricia Ashworth looked expensively pleasant. Their daughter, Victoria, was everything Rachel feared: tall, golden, polished, the kind of woman who'd never known what minimum wage meant. "Nate," Margaret said, lips curving. "And this must be Rachel. How lovely you could join us." Nate's jaw tightened. "Mother, thank you for having us." "Everyone! This is Rachel Grant, my girlfriend." The word dropped like a gauntlet. Margaret's smile flickered. "So nice to meet you. Nate mentioned you work in hospitality." "I'm a waitress," Rachel said evenly. "At Lombardi's and at Rosie's diner during the day." "How industrious," Victoria said, her tone sugar and acid. "Two jobs, when do you find time for anything else?" "I make time for what matters," Rachel replied. "My daughter, mostly." "A daughter?" Patricia Ashworth blinked. "Single mother? That must be challenging." "She's amazing," Rachel said. "Worth every challenge. Shall we eat?" Margaret said smoothly, ending the introductions before her son could speak. Dinner was an exercise in restraint. The table gleamed with china and crystal. Servants moved silently, and the air buzzed with polite cruelty. "So, Rachel," Victoria began, "Nate mentioned you're interested in architecture. Did you study it formally?" "I started at SF State," Rachel said. "Had to leave when I got pregnant." "What a shame." Victoria smiled sweetly. "Architecture requires commitment. I almost went that route before choosing finance. More practical." "Architecture's practical," Rachel said lightly. "Buildings tend to be useful," Victoria laughed. "Of course. I just meant, well, it's not exactly lucrative unless you're from, the right schools." Rachel smiled tightly. "Like Wharton?" Victoria blinked. "Well, yes. Impressive," Rachel said, sipping her water. "And how's managing $500 million in venture capital treating you?" Margaret's eyes glittered with pride. "She's modest. Victoria's one of the best in her field." The comparison hung like fog. Victoria, educated and pedigreed. Rachel, blue-collar and self-made. Nate's voice cut through. "Rachel's helped me with business decisions, too. She has a perspective most executives lack. She's the reason we kept the Oakland warehouse open." Margaret's smile faltered. "You're taking corporate advice from someone who understands human impact," Nate interrupted. "She makes me better at what I do." "Wonderful," Margaret said thinly. "Though I do hope the board approves of intuitive management." "Mother," he said sharply, "the board doesn't run my company." "I do." The silence that followed was brittle. Forks clinked. Someone cleared their throat. Rachel set her napkin down. "Excuse me, I need some air." Outside, the night air bit against her flushed skin. She stood on the steps, hands trembling with anger and humiliation. "Rachel," Nate's voice came from behind her. "I'm so sorry." "That was exactly what she wanted," Rachel said. "A performance, to remind me where I stand. She doesn't matter." "She does, Nate, because she's your mother, and this is your world. You belong here." "I don't," he stepped closer. "You belong with me." "I can't keep fighting to prove I'm worthy of something that should already be enough." "Rachel." "No," she said, voice shaking. "There will always be another dinner, another Victoria, another reminder that I'm not one of you." "I can't do that forever. And I won't drag Sophie through it." "So what? You're ending this because of one awful night?" "I'm saying I don't know if love is enough." Tears slipped free. "I'm exhausted, Nate. I can't keep defending my existence." "Then stop defending it and live it," he said fiercely. "I love you. I love Sophie. And I don't care what my mother thinks. You make me want to be more than my last deal." "Isn't that enough?" Rachel's breath caught. "You love me?" "I thought that was obvious." His hands cupped her face. "I love you, and I want a life with you. But if you run every time it gets hard, they win." "Is that what you want?" Rachel's voice broke. "What I want is for you to stand up to her for yourself, because she doesn't respect you either. You You can't build a life with me if you're still living under her control. Something shifted in his expression. Calm. Resolve. You're right. The door creaked open. Margaret stood framed in the light. Am I interrupting? Yes, Nate said. But stay. We need to talk. He turned to Rachel. Wait here? She nodded, heart pounding, as Nate and his mother disappeared inside. Minutes passed. Then the door opened again, Victoria this time. Cool and composed. That was quite the exit, she said, coming to lean on the railing. I'm not interested in your commentary. Relax. I'm not here to gloat. She hesitated. You know, I used to think Nate was just lonely. That's why he never settled down. But then I saw the way he looks at you. It's inconveniently genuine. Rachel stayed silent. He's been surrounded by people who want his money for years, Victoria continued. And then you came along someone who didn't. That's rare. But it also means everyone's going to test you. His mother, the board, the press. If you can't stand that heat, you should walk away now. You don't know what I can handle. Then prove it, Victoria said simply. Go back in there. Stand beside him. Show Margaret Cross that you're not afraid. Before Rachel could answer, the door opened again. Nate stepped out, shoulders squared, eyes blazing but free. We're leaving, he said. What happened? I told my mother she doesn't get to comment on my life anymore. That if she can't respect you, she loses access to me. And I told the Ashworths to stop trying to sell me their daughter. His hand found hers. Should have done it years ago. You made me brave enough. Victoria's gaze softened. For what it's worth, you two make sense. You challenge each other. That's rare. Thank you, Rachel said quietly. Don't thank me yet, Victoria replied. Margaret Cross doesn't lose gracefully. In the car, Nate pulled Rachel close. I'm sorry you went through that. It's not your fault, she murmured. Your mother's impossible. That's generous, she smiled faintly, exhaustion washing over her. I meant what I said, he whispered. I love you. I'll prove every day that you belong in my life exactly as you are. I love you too, she said, the words trembling out. But I can't lose myself trying to fit in. Then we build our own world, Nate said softly. One where we both belong. Where Sophie belongs. No rules. No apologies. It sounded like a fantasy, but for the first time, Rachel wanted to believe it. She closed her eyes, leaned into him, and let herself imagine that maybe love really could be enough, even when everything else was breaking. The week after the dinner from hell, as Rachel called it, felt disorienting, like someone had shaken her snow globe life, and she was waiting for the pieces to land. Nate, true to his word, had drawn a line with his mother. When Margaret called, he'd calmly said that unless she could respect Rachel, she wouldn't be part of his life. She'd hung up. He'd looked almost relieved. I spent 20 years chasing her approval, he told Rachel one morning over coffee from the espresso machine, now claiming half her counter. And it was never enough. Finally admitting that is oddly peaceful. Rachel understood. There was a strange freedom in walking away from a battle you could never win. But freedom came with consequences. Nate was suddenly everywhere, dropping by Rosie's diner before work, showing up at Lombardi's after her shift, sitting at the counter like a man allergic to distance. He played chess with Sophie, listened to her passionate explanations of how buildings should breathe, and somehow made himself part of their daily routine without disrupting it. They were becoming a unit, a family. And that terrified Rachel more than she wanted to admit. Mikhail noticed first. Your billionaire's back again, he muttered, polishing glasses. Half the waitstaff's jealous. That's not romance, that's devotion. It's complicated, Rachel said. Complicated looks good on you. He wasn't wrong. Still, it scared her how natural it felt to lean on someone again. That Thursday, walking toward John's car after her shift, Nate said, I have something to ask. Please hear me out before saying no. Now I'm worried. It's about next weekend. The dinner with my friends, it's still on. Rachel froze. After that last dinner? These people aren't like my mother. They're the ones I actually choose to spend time with. Lisa David's widow, John, Sarah Martinez from the collective. Real people. You'll like them. Her skepticism must have shown. Rachel, he said gently, every time I invite you into my world, you act like it's an exam. It's not. You're not being tested. You're being included. She sighed. Your friends are probably educated, rich, confident. I'll just be the waitress who got lucky. He stopped under the streetlight. My closest friend drives for a living. Another runs a women's shelter. Sarah builds community housing. None of them care about status. They care about heart. That softened her. Sarah will be there? I asked her because she makes you feel safe. She also wants to know if you've thought more about finishing your degree. I have. But it's impossible. Sophie just recovered from surgery. And what if it isn't impossible? He said, stepping closer. What if you had the time and stability to study again? What if you could build the career you wanted? Rachel frowned. Nate, just listen. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a path. Quit one of your jobs. Take online classes through SF State's reentry program, and you looked into it? He smiled sheepishly. Of course I did. Because I love you, and I want you to have what you want. Her breath caught. You're serious? Completely. And there's more. I want you to come work for Cross Industries. What? Not as a token hire. We need someone in real estate development who can evaluate community impact, someone who knows what gentrification feels like. You'd bring insight no MBA can. I'm not qualified. You are. You've lived it. And it pays well enough to quit both jobs, cover Sophie's needs, and finish your degree. Full benefits. Real stability. It was too much. Too perfect. Nate, if I take that job, everyone will say I'm using you. Let them. They'll talk no matter what you do. The only voice that matters is yours. So what do you want? She closed her eyes and dared to imagine. Steady hours, health insurance, time with Sophie, and work that actually mattered. But it still felt like standing on a bridge she wasn't sure could hold. I need to think, she whispered. Fair. He brushed her cheek. Then promise me this come Saturday. Meet my friends. See that my world doesn't always look like my mother's? Rachel hesitated, then nodded. Okay, but jeans? No fancy dresses left. Perfect. They'd probably ban me if I wore a suit. He grinned, relieved. Friday crawled by. Rachel alternated between panic and excitement, texting Sarah for advice. What do I wear? How do I not embarrass myself? Sarah replied instantly. Jeans, nice top. Maybe earrings. And you couldn't embarrass yourself if you tried. Just be you. What if me isn't enough? Then he's not the man you think he is. But he is. Trust that. That night, after Sophie fell asleep, Rachel pulled out her sketchbook. She didn't draw buildings this time, she drew a bridge. Two worlds connected by steel and faith. A structure strong enough to carry weight, yet flexible enough to survive storms. Her phone buzzed. Nate. Can't sleep. Thinking about you, Rachel. Drawing. Nate. Show me? She snapped a photo. Nate. That's beautiful. A bridge, Rachel. A metaphor. Nate. For us. Rachel. Maybe. Nate. Then it's perfect. I like that you see us as a bridge, not a divide. She smiled. You're a romantic, she typed. Nate. Only with you. Everyone else gets spreadsheets. By 2 a.m., their conversation dwindled into sleepy affection. Big day tomorrow, he texted finally. They'll love you. Rachel set her phone down, staring at the unfinished bridge. She wanted to believe him. Saturday evening arrived faster than she was ready for. After 3 outfit changes, she settled on dark jeans and a soft green sweater. Sophie swore made her eyes look like sea glass. You look beautiful, Sophie declared. Real beautiful, not fake pretty. Rachel kissed her forehead. Wish me luck. You don't need luck. You've got heart. Nate showed up in a simple button-down, no driver, no flash. You're radiant, he said. You said casual. I didn't say ordinary. Lisa's house sat in the Sunset District, modest, warm, and alive. Children's toys dotted the lawn. Laughter spilled from the windows. This wasn't wealth on display. It was life being lived. The door flew open before they could knock. "Nate!" cried a woman with kind eyes and an apron dusted in flour. "And you must be Rachel." "I must be," Rachel said, smiling. "I'm Lisa, David's widow, though I prefer bossy friend. Come in. Food's almost ready." Inside, the smell of garlic and bread felt like home. Sarah waved from the couch, calling, "You made it! I was afraid Nate's intensity scared you off." "He tried," Rachel said. "Didn't work." John appeared from the kitchen holding a beer. "Evening, Ms. Grant. Good to see you under less dramatic circumstances." Rachel laughed. "Thank you for rescuing me that night." "Best detour of my career," he said. He's been insufferably happy ever since. Introductions followed Tom and Jennifer Park, both warm and unpretentious. Jennifer, Nate's assistant, grinned, finally meeting the woman who makes my boss human again. They gathered around a scarred oak table set with mismatched plates. Lisa served lasagna and salad while conversation flowed easily. No one talked about money. No one name-dropped. Sarah discussed her latest project, a community center co-designed with local residents. Tom explained his housing advocacy nonprofit, Fighting Displacement. John told stories about his daughter applying to art school. When he worried aloud about her lack of a practical plan, Rachel surprised herself by speaking up. "Art is practical. It helps us understand ourselves." "That's worth something." "Exactly," Sarah said, raising her glass. "See? Rachel gets it." Even Nate looked different here, relaxed, laughing easily. Free from boardroom armor, Rachel found herself talking. Really talking. About her neighborhood, about rent hikes and families forced out. About beauty in small places, the mural on the bodega wall. The community garden kept alive by retirees. And people listened. For once, she didn't feel out of place. After dinner, Lisa brought out photo albums. "If you're dating Nate, you deserve fair warning." They flipped through childhood pictures, two boys with matching smiles, David's open and bright, Nate's reserved but kind. The laughter dimmed as the pages ended. Lisa touched a photo of the brothers at the beach. "He'd have liked you," she told Rachel. "He wanted Nate to find someone real." Rachel swallowed the lump in her throat. "I'm sorry you lost him." "I didn't lose him," Lisa said softly. "He just lives differently now. Through Nate. Through nights like this." Later, while everyone lingered with coffee, Sarah pulled Rachel aside. "So," she said, "still think you don't belong in his world?" Rachel smiled. "Tonight didn't feel like his world. It felt like ours." "Good, because you're part of it now. And about that job? Take it." "I'm terrified," Rachel admitted. "What if people think I only got it because of him? What if I fail?" Sarah squeezed her hand. "Then you'll get up and keep going. That's what brave people do. And you, my friend, are brave." On the drive home, the city lights blurred past. "Your friends are incredible," Rachel said. "They're family," Nate replied. "And they adored you." "They adored David," she said softly. "That's what connects you all." "And now you," he said. "If you'll let them." Rachel thought of Lisa's warmth, Sarah's faith, John's easy humor. Of Sophie, who deserved a community like that. Of the sketch of the bridge still on her table. "I'll take the job," she said quietly. Nate almost missed the turn. "Really?" "I'm scared. But I'm saying yes anyway. And I'll enroll in that continuing ed program. I'll figure it out." His hand found hers. "You have no idea how proud I am right now." "Don't be proud yet. I haven't done anything but commit." "That's the hardest part," he said. "The rest is building." When he parked outside her building, he turned to her. "We're going to make this work, Rachel. You, me, Sophie, all of it. For the first time, she believed him. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were rebuilding. Dreams, love, life, all of it. Together. 6 months later, Rachel Grant barely recognized the woman staring back from her mirror. Gone was the exhausted waitress from Lombardi's, replaced by a confident professional with purpose in her eyes and a future she was finally building. Today was her first presentation to the Cross Industries Board, her proposal for a revolutionary affordable housing initiative that could redefine how the company approached development. "Mama, you look like a boss lady," Sophie called from the kitchen. The girl was 8 now, healthy, radiant, still recovering from her surgery but bursting with energy. Mrs. Carson, who had become like a grandmother, was helping her pack breakfast. Rachel smiled. "And you, Miss Architect, ready for school?" "Almost. Mr. Alex is picking me up after, right?" "If his meeting finishes on time." Nate had become a constant in their lives, not in the suffocating way Rachel once feared, but in the steady, grounding way she'd never known she needed. He'd learned how to be gentle with Sophie, patient with Rachel's boundaries, and willing to earn trust, one small moment at a time. Her phone buzzed. "Nate, good luck today. You're going to be brilliant. And yes, I'm picking up Sophie. Don't argue, Rachel. Not before dinner. Nothing with too much sugar." Nate. "Fine. Sensible yogurt." "Love you." Sophie caught her mother's smile. "You always look like that when you text him." "Like what?" "Like you're happy but pretending not to be." Rachel laughed and hugged her tight. "Go finish your breakfast, you little philosopher." At Cross Industries, she was no longer the girlfriend. 6 months in, she'd proven her worth. Her office overlooked the bay, its walls lined with Sophie's drawings and Rachel's framed sketches, reminders of why she was here. Her proposal was ambitious: to redesign affordable housing around dignity, not minimum compliance; to make beauty accessible, not exclusive. When she entered the boardroom, Nate's nod was formal, professional. They'd agreed on this no favoritism at work. "Ms. Grant," he said, in CEO tone. "You have the floor," Rachel breathed deeply. "For 6 months, I've analyzed our housing developments, and I've found a problem. We're building units, not communities." Her slides showed sterile, impersonal complexes. These buildings fulfill the law, but not the heart. Residents deserve more than boxes. They deserve homes. A skeptical board member asked if she was suggesting making affordable housing look expensive. "I'm suggesting we design it with pride," she replied. "Good architecture doesn't have to cost more. It just requires empathy." She outlined her plan: mixed-income developments, shared green spaces, shops for local businesses. The math was simple: 5% higher upfront cost for long-term community stability. Questions came fast, some curious, some dismissive. Rachel stood her ground, data in one hand, conviction in the other. Finally, Nate asked, "What makes you confident this will work?" "Because I've lived it," she said quietly. "I've seen what happens when people are treated as afterthoughts. And I've seen how dignity can rebuild a life. Affordable shouldn't mean lesser. This company can prove that." When she finished, the silence was electric. Then Nate nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Grant. The board will review your proposal." Outside the boardroom, her knees nearly gave out. Minutes later, her phone rang. "You were incredible," Nate said. Even Patricia Ashworth looked impressed. "You think they'll approve it?" "They'd be fools not to." He paused, voice softening. "I'm proud of you, Rachel. So damn proud." That night, she came home to find flour coating the kit cross like snow. Nate and Sophie stood grinning beside a half-burned pizza. "Cooking lesson gone wrong?" she teased. "Strategic chaos," Nate said. "We're learning together." They gave up and ordered Chinese. Over dinner, Sophie announced she'd gotten an A on her architecture project. "Can I go to that summer program at the Art Institute?" she asked. "Of course," Rachel said, glancing at Nate, who smiled. The words, of course, still felt miraculous. Later, as they cleaned up, Nate said quietly, "The board approved your plan. A pilot project in Bayview. You'll lead it." Rachel froze. "They approved it?" "They did. You did this." Before she could reply, he added, "Also, my mother called." Rachel tensed. "She's been in therapy. She wants to apologize for everything. No strings. Just an apology. Do you believe her?" "I think she's trying. I'd like you to meet her again. Once, if you're willing." Rachel hesitated, then nodded. "One lunch. But if she attacks me again, we're done." "Deal," he said, kissing her forehead. They sat on the couch afterward, wrapped in a rare quiet. Then Nate said, "I have something to ask you, and please don't panic." She raised an eyebrow. "That's never a good start." "I want us to live together. Properly. I found a house in Noe Valley, a yard. Sunlight. Nothing extravagant. I want it to be ours. Nate, listen. You'll pay what you do now for rent. I'll cover the rest. Not equal, but fair. I'm not trying to own you, Rachel. I just want to build something together. A real family." It was everything she'd once feared, and everything she now secretly wanted. "Still," she said, "I'll think about it. And Sophie gets a vote." "Of course." The next morning, over pancakes, Rachel told Sophie about the idea. "Mr. Alex wants us to move in?" the girl asked, eyes bright. "Would that make him my dad?" Rachel blinked. "Would you want that?" "I think, maybe, he makes you happy. That's what dads are supposed to do, right?" Rachel hugged her, her throat tight. That evening, she called Nate. "Yes," she said simply. "We'll move in." 3 months later, they did. The Edwardian in Noe Valley wasn't a mansion, just a warm, sunlit home with a small yard and a kit cross that smelled of garlic and coffee. Friends helped them move Lisa, Sarah, John, Mrs. Carson, even Margaret, who brought dumplings and offered a quiet blessing. After everyone left, Rachel and Nate sat amid boxes, drinking wine from mugs. "We did it," he said, looking around. "We actually built a life." "We did." "I'm stepping down as CEO," he said suddenly. She turned. "What?" "I'll stay on as chairman, but I want to live. I want dinners with you and Sophie. I want to see her school plays. I've spent 20 years building wealth. Now I want to build memories." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "That's the most romantic thing you've ever said," he smiled. "Really? Not the house or the job offer?" "No, because this isn't about me, it's about you choosing life. Choosing us." 18 months later, Rachel stood in a cap and gown at San Francisco State, her heart pounding with joy. She'd done it, graduated with her Bachelor of Architecture. In the audience, Sophie waved a glittery sign. "My Mama, the Architect." Nate, Lisa, John, Sarah, Mrs. Carson, and even Margaret sat beside her, all smiling through tears. When Rachel's name was called, the applause was deafening. She walked the stage thinking of every night she'd doubted herself, every moment she'd almost quit, every miracle that had carried her here. Later, at their backyard celebration, Nate wrapped his arm around her waist. "I have something for you." He handed her a small box. Inside was a single key. "A key? To your new studio downtown. I rented it for you. A space for your own projects, your designs, your future." Rachel stared at him, overwhelmed. "You rented me a studio? I invested in your dream," he said softly. "You've spent years helping others build theirs. Now it's your turn," she laughed through tears. "You always know exactly what I need." "When you're ready," he added, "I hope you'll say yes to marrying me." "Not now when it feels right. I can wait," she kissed him. "Eventually," she whispered. Yes, 3 years later, the magazine spread on her desk made her smile. Building Dreams, How Rachel Grant is Transforming Affordable Housing Design. Photos showed her projects vibrant, human-centered communities that had replaced sterile concrete with art, gardens, and belonging. Nate's quote at the end read, "She doesn't just design buildings, she designs hope." Her phone buzzed. "Nate, lunch? Outside your office. Miss your face." Rachel looked out the window. There he was, leaning against his car, grinning like it was their first date. She grabbed her coat and stepped into the sunshine. Across the street, cranes rose over her latest project, a mixed-income complex designed with community art spaces and rooftop gardens. Sophie, now 11, was sketching her own designs for an upcoming youth architecture competition. Margaret and Rachel had reached a truce. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. Terrible coffee? Rachel teased as she approached Nate. The worst, but I'll suffer through it for you. They found a diner with cracked booths and overworked waitresses, the kind Rachel once served in. Their young server smiled tiredly as she took their order. "How's your day?" Rachel asked gently. "Long," the waitress admitted. "I'm pulling doubles. My kid's got a field trip next week, and I'm trying to cover the cost." "How much?" Nate asked casually. $50. She caught herself. "Sorry, you don't need to hear that." Rachel handed her a business card. "Call this number tomorrow. Ask for Maya in Community Outreach. She'll help you." "No strings," the waitress blinked. "Why would you do that?" "Because someone once did it for me," Rachel said. "And it changed everything." When the waitress walked away, Nate took her hand. "You're amazing. I learned from you," she said. "You showed me that money means nothing unless it helps someone stand a little taller." They ate their pie and left a $100 tip. As they walked out, Rachel saw the waitress crying quietly, holding the bill like it was a lifeline. "This is what it's about," she said softly. "Not the awards or magazine articles. Just letting people know they're seen." Nate nodded. "That's all I wanted to do that night in the hospital. I didn't want to be your savior. I just wanted you to know you weren't alone." "You did more than that," she said, stopping on the sidewalk. "You saw me when I couldn't even see myself." "And you saw me," he replied. "Not the money or the name. Just me." They kissed, the city buzzing around them. That night, after Sophie was asleep, they sat at the Kit Cross table reviewing plans for their next project, a foundation for single parents. Career support, housing aid, childcare, the kind of help Rachel once needed. Her phone buzzed again, a message from the diner waitress. "Thank you. You gave me more than money. You gave me hope." Rachel showed it to Nate. "This," she said, "is the real reward." He nodded, wrapping his arms around her. "You know what I've learned?" "What?" "That success isn't about building empires. It's about coming home to something real, to someone who reminds you what matters." Rachel smiled through tears. "Then I guess we're both successful." Outside, San Francisco glowed millions of lights, millions of stories. Somewhere out there, someone was struggling, thinking no one cared. They couldn't save everyone, but they could keep building bridges between fear and hope, between loneliness and love. Rachel thought back to that night in the hospital when she'd whispered, "I don't need your money." She'd been right. She hadn't needed money. She'd needed someone to say, "You don't have to do this alone." Nate had heard her, and he'd stayed. That was the miracle. Not wealth, not rescue connection. The foundation they'd built together wasn't made of stone or steel. It was made of trust, compassion, and choice. And every day, they chose each other. That, Rachel thought, was how real love was built. One act of courage, one moment of grace, one bridge at a time. Thank you for joining Rachel and Nate on their journey from that desperate moment in a hospital corridor to building a life and partnership that transformed them both. Their story reminds us that sometimes the best things in life come from being brave enough to be vulnerable, wise enough to accept help, and open enough to let love in even when it seems impossible.